The dust kicked up in lazy spirals as Marcus Thornwood's truck rumbled down the old county road, the afternoon sun beating mercilessly on the cracked windshield. He'd been making this drive for 15 years now, ever since he'd bought the sprawling ranch that stretched across 3,000 acres of Texas Hill Country. The land was beautiful, profitable, and utterly isolating. At 52, Marcus had grown accustomed to the silence, though some nights it pressed against him like a physical weight. He was thinking about nothing in particular when he saw the movement in the ditch beside the road. At first, he thought it was a coyote or maybe a deer that had been hit by a passing car. But as he slowed the truck, his heart lurched. It was a dog, and she was crawling. Barely moving, really, dragging herself forward with her front legs while her back end remained nearly motionless. Marcus pulled over immediately, dust billowing around his tires. He approached cautiously, not wanting to frighten the animal, but when he got closer, his jaw tightened. The dog was a German shepherd, or had been once, beneath the matted fur and protruding ribs. Her brown eyes looked up at him with a mixture of fear and something that looked almost like resignation. She didn't even try to growl or defend herself. "Easy there, girl," Marcus said softly, kneeling down. That's when he saw the rope still tied around her neck, frayed at one end as if she'd been tethered somewhere and somehow broken free. His hands clenched into fists. He'd seen plenty of ranch dogs in his time, working animals that were treated well and lived good lives. But he'd also seen the other kind, the ones people got tired of, the ones that became inconvenient. The dog's back legs were twisted at an odd angle, and Marcus could see old scars along her haunches. His veterinary knowledge was limited to livestock, but he could tell this wasn't a recent injury. This had happened some time ago, and whoever had owned this dog had decided she wasn't worth the trouble anymore. The word came to him unbidden, something he'd probably heard some heartless rancher say years ago: lame. They'd called her lame and thrown her away like garbage. "Not on my watch," Marcus muttered. He went back to his truck and grabbed an old blanket from behind the seat. The dog whimpered when he carefully slid his arms beneath her, but she didn't snap or fight. It was as if she'd given up on the idea that anyone might help her. Marcus settled her gently in the passenger seat, and those brown eyes watched him with an intensity that made his chest ache. The drive to Doc Harrison's veterinary clinic took 20 minutes, though Marcus made it in 15. Sarah Harrison had been tending to animals in the county for 30 years, and if anyone could help this dog, it would be her. He carried the German shepherd inside, and Sarah's expression shifted from surprise to grim determination the moment she saw what he was carrying. "Found her on County Road 12, Marcus said. "Looks like she was dumped." Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line as she examined the dog. Rope burn around the neck, severe malnutrition, and these back legs. This injury is at least 2 months old, maybe more. It's healed wrong. Someone didn't want to pay for surgery, by the looks of it. "Can you fix her?" Sarah looked at him over her glasses. "Marcus, even with surgery, she may never walk properly again. The recovery would be long, expensive, and there's no guarantee. Most people wouldn't consider it worth the investment." "Good thing I'm not most people. Do what needs to be done." Over the following weeks, Marcus found himself making daily trips to the clinic. The dog, whom Sarah had simply been calling Girl, underwent surgery to realign her hip and repair ligaments that had healed improperly. The procedure was complex and costly, but Marcus never hesitated. He'd built his ranch from nothing after his divorce, pouring his grief and loneliness into the land and cattle. Money wasn't an issue. Purpose was. Sarah told him about the dog's recovery during one of his visits, 3 weeks after the surgery. "She's a fighter. Most dogs would have given up by now, but she pushes through every physical therapy session. It's like she knows you're coming back for her." Marcus had started bringing treats, premium dog food, and eventually, toys. The first time Girl's tail wagged, a small, tentative movement, he felt something unlock in his chest. She'd been watching him approach through the kennel gate, and when he'd said her name, because by then, he'd started calling her Grace, though he told himself it was temporary, her whole body had trembled with what could only be called joy. The veterinary assistant, a young woman named Jade, commented on it. "She doesn't react that way to anyone else. She's been waiting for you." When the day finally came to bring Grace home, Marcus had already prepared. He'd converted one of the spare rooms on the ground floor of his ranch house into a recovery space, complete with orthopedic bedding, non-slip mats, and everything Sarah had recommended. He'd even installed ramps on the porch steps. The first night, Grace lay on her bed, but her eyes never left Marcus as he moved around the kitchen preparing dinner. He caught himself talking to her, something he hadn't done with another living soul in months. "Tomorrow, we'll take a short walk. Just to the barn and back. Sarah says the movement is good for you, helps build strength." Grace's ear twitched, and Marcus smiled. The months that followed transformed both of them. Grace's physical therapy became their daily routine. At first, she could barely make it to the end of the driveway, her rehabilitated legs shaky and uncertain. But Marcus was patient, encouraging, never pushing too hard. He'd kneel beside her, his hand on her head, and say, "You're doing great, girl. We'll get there." And they did. By the 4th month, Grace could walk the perimeter of the near pasture. By the 6th, she was joining Marcus on his rounds, checking fence lines and water troughs. She'd never run like a young dog again, her gait would always be slightly uneven, but she moved with determination and growing confidence. The spark that had been nearly extinguished when Marcus found her was now a steady flame. What surprised Marcus most was how Grace changed him. The ranch house, which had echoed with emptiness for so long, now felt like a home. He found himself coming in earlier from work, eager to see Grace waiting by the window. He started cooking real meals again instead of eating standing up by the sink. He even accepted an invitation to a neighbor's barbecue, something he'd avoided for years, because they'd said he could bring Grace. At that barbecue, an older rancher named Tom Miller approached him. "That your German shepherd?" "Yes, sir." "Looks like she had a rough go of it." Marcus's jaw tightened. Someone decided she wasn't worth keeping. Tom nodded slowly, watching Grace as she lay beside Marcus's chair, her eyes alert and content. "My daddy used to say you can tell a lot about a man by how he treats an animal that can't do nothing for him in return. That dog looks at you like you hung the moon." "I think it's the other way around," Marcus said quietly. "I found her when I needed her most. I just didn't know it at the time." The truth of those words settled over him in the following weeks. He'd been going through the motions of life, successful by any external measure but hollow inside. His ex-wife had left because, as she'd put it, he loved the land more than he could ever love a person. Maybe that had been true once. But Grace had reminded him that he had more to give than just labor and land management. One evening, nearly a year after he'd found Grace, Marcus sat on his porch watching the sunset paint the hills in shades of orange and purple. Grace lay beside his chair, her head resting on his boot. He thought about the day he'd found her, broken and abandoned, crawling through the dust with nothing but the will to survive. People had called her lame, worthless, not worth the effort. They'd left her to die because she no longer served a purpose they valued. But they'd been wrong. Grace wasn't lame, she was resilient. She wasn't worthless, she'd given Marcus something he hadn't even known he'd lost. And she'd been worth every penny, every hour of therapy, every moment of care. Marcus reached down and scratched behind Grace's ears, and she leaned into his touch with a contented sigh. "Thank you, girl," he whispered. "Thank you for not giving up." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Marcus realized that Grace had saved him just as surely as he'd saved her. They'd both been abandoned in their own ways, both struggling through their own kinds of pain. But they'd found each other at exactly the right moment, two souls that needed rescuing, and in doing so, had discovered that sometimes the things we dismiss as broken are simply waiting for someone to see their true worth. Grace shifted, pressing closer to his leg, and Marcus smiled. The loneliness that had defined his life for so long had finally lifted, replaced by something he'd thought he'd never find again. A sense of belonging, of being needed and valued not for what he could provide, but simply for who he was. The ranch was still vast, the work was still demanding, and the nights were still quiet. But now, when he walked through his door, someone was always waiting, always happy to see him, always ready to remind him that he wasn't alone. They'd both been given a second chance, and neither of them would waste it.